This episode contains mature themes and includes narration produced using AI voice technology. Listener discretion is advised. It was Christmas Eve, 1945, and the Sodder family home in Fayetteville, West Virginia, was filled with the warmth and joy of the holiday season. The 9 Sodder children who still lived at home were buzzing with excitement, their laughter echoing through the halls. Outside, a fresh blanket of snow covered the ground, reflecting the glow of the Christmas lights strung around the house. But as the night wore on, a chilling event would unfold that would turn the joyous occasion into an enduring mystery. This is the story of the Sodder children, 5 siblings who vanished without a trace, leaving behind a legacy of questions and heartache. Welcome to 3 Theories, the podcast where we uncover the great mysteries of the world. I'm Elena Hart, your guide on this journey through the unknown. Each episode will examine unsolved cases, paranormal phenomena, and historical and natural mysteries, and explore 3 compelling theories to help you decide, what do you believe? In the early hours of Christmas Day, 1945, a fire broke out at the Sodder family home in Fayetteville, West Virginia. Despite George and Jenny Sodder's desperate efforts to save their children, 5 of the siblings, Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty, were never seen again. The official explanation was that the children perished in the fire. But as the years passed, strange occurrences and unanswered questions suggested a more sinister possibility. What really happened to the Sodder children on that fateful night? The night had begun like any other Christmas Eve. The Sodder family gathered around the living room, the glow of the fireplace casting a warm light over the room. The scent of pine from the Christmas tree mingled with the rich aroma of holiday treats. George and Jenny Sodder, along with 9 of their 10 children, celebrated the holiday, their home filled with laughter and love. As the night wore on, the younger children grew tired. Jenny and George helped them to bed, tucking them in with gentle whispers of goodnight. The older children, still full of energy, stayed up a bit longer, playing with their new toys and savoring the last moments of Christmas Eve. Eventually, the house grew quiet as everyone settled in for the night. At around 12:30 a.m., Jenny was awakened by the sound of a telephone ringing. She went downstairs to answer it, only to hear a strange female voice asking for someone she didn't know. The caller laughed oddly before hanging up. As Jenny returned to bed, she noticed that all the downstairs lights were on, and the front door was unlocked. She assumed her children had forgotten to turn them off after their Christmas festivities. A short time later, Jenny was jolted awake again, this time by a loud thump on the roof, followed by a rolling noise. Puzzled, she lay still for a moment, listening intently. When she heard nothing more, she tried to calm herself and drifted back to sleep. At approximately 1:30 a.m., Jenny woke to the smell of smoke. She sprang out of bed and ran to George's side, shaking him awake. "The house is on fire," she screamed. George leapt out of bed, and they both rushed to get their children. Flames were rapidly spreading through the house, and the smoke was thick and suffocating. The family's eldest sons, John and George Jr., who were sleeping in a room above the garage, escaped with minor burns, along with George and Jenny and their youngest child, Sylvia. But as George tried to re-enter the house to save the remaining 5 children, he was met with a wall of fire. The staircase had collapsed, blocking his path. Desperate, George ran outside to grab his ladder, only to find that it had mysteriously vanished. He then tried to move one of his trucks to the side of the house to climb up, but inexplicably, neither truck would start, despite working fine the previous day. George even tried to scoop water from a rain barrel, but it was frozen solid. In a state of panic and helplessness, George and Jenny watched as their home was consumed by flames. Neighbors, alerted by the blaze, gathered and tried to help, but it was too late. Firefighters, hampered by holiday staffing issues and a lack of available resources, didn't arrive until later in the morning. By the time they got there, the house had collapsed into a pile of smoldering ash. Investigators initially concluded that the fire was caused by faulty wiring, but George and Jenny were not convinced. They noticed several suspicious circumstances surrounding the fire and the events leading up to it. The phone lines to the house had been cut, not burned. A telephone repairman confirmed that they'd been deliberately severed. Strangely, months before the blaze, a man had visited the Sodder home, ostensibly seeking work. He had wandered around the house, pointing out the fuse boxes and ominously warning George that they would cause a fire someday. Around the same time, another man attempted to sell the family life insurance, becoming irate when George refused. The salesman threatened George, saying that his house would go up in smoke and his children would be destroyed because of his outspoken criticism of Benito Mussolini, the Italian dictator. Mysteriously, despite the fire consuming the house, no human remains were found in the ashes. A state inspector assured the Sodders that the fire had been hot enough to completely incinerate the bodies. But Jenny later conducted her own experiments, burning animal bones to see if they would be reduced to ash. They were not, which raised further doubts. As the days turned into weeks and weeks into months, George and Jenny began to uncover troubling details. A witness claimed to have seen a man at the fire scene taking a block and tackle used for removing car engines, which could explain why George's trucks wouldn't start. Another reported seeing a woman watching the fire from a car and then driving away. Even more unsettling, a local bus driver reported seeing balls of fire being thrown onto the roof of the Sodder house, possibly explaining the thump Jenny heard. Over the years, there were numerous reported sightings of the Sodder children. A woman claimed to have seen them in a car the night of the fire, and another woman in Charleston, West Virginia, said she had seen 4 of the children with 2 Italian-speaking adults a week after the fire. These sightings fueled the belief that the children had survived and were possibly abducted. The Sodders were convinced their children were still alive. They erected a billboard along Route 16 with pictures of the missing children, offering a reward for information leading to their whereabouts. The billboard remained a local landmark for decades, keeping the memory of the missing children alive and the mystery unsolved. In 1949, George sought the help of a Washington, D.C. pathologist who conducted a new search at the fire site. Among the findings was a small piece of vertebrae, which was sent to the Smithsonian Institution for analysis. The report concluded that the bones were from an individual aged 16 to 17 years, which didn't match the ages of the missing children. Additionally, the bones showed no evidence of exposure to flame, suggesting they may have been planted there. Adding to the intrigue, Jenny received a letter in the 1960s containing a photograph of a young man. The letter was postmarked from Kentucky, but had no return address. On the back of the photograph was a cryptic message. Louis Sodder, I love Brother Frankie, Elil Boys, a 90132 or 35. The resemblance to their missing son Louis was uncanny. George traveled to Kentucky to investigate, but found no leads. This mysterious photograph only deepened the family's belief that their children had survived. But what really happened to the Sodder children on that fateful Christmas Eve? Were they tragically lost in the fire? Or did they escape, only to face a different, perhaps even more sinister fate? Did someone have a motive to harm the Sodder family? Or could the children's disappearance be explained by a series of unfortunate coincidences? Our first theory suggests that the fire at the Sodder home was a tragic accident and that the 5 missing children perished in the blaze. This explanation aligns with the initial conclusion of the local authorities, who attributed the fire to faulty wiring. Despite the family's doubts, this theory remains a plausible explanation for the events of that night. According to this theory, the fire started in the early hours of December 25th, 1945, due to an electrical malfunction. The Christmas lights, which had been left on overnight, could have caused a short circuit, igniting the wooden structure of the house. Once the fire started, it spread rapidly through the home, which was typical for the building materials and designs of the time. When the fire broke out, the Sodder family members were in various parts of the house. George and Jenny, along with 4 of their children, managed to escape, but the 5 younger children, who were sleeping in the attic, were trapped. The flames and smoke would have quickly overwhelmed the wooden staircase leading to the attic, cutting off their escape route. In the chaos of the fire, George and Jenny made desperate attempts to rescue their children. George's efforts to use a ladder to reach the attic windows were thwarted when the ladder was found missing from its usual spot. His trucks, which could have been used to reach the windows, mysteriously failed to start. These obstacles, while suspicious to some, could be explained by the disorientation and panic of the moment, or by mechanical failures exacerbated by the fire and smoke. The lack of human remains in the ashes has been a significant point of contention for those who doubt this theory. However, fire experts and investigators have noted that it is possible for a fire to burn at high enough temperatures to incinerate human remains completely, especially given the intensity and duration of the blaze. The extreme heat, combined with the collapse of the house and the subsequent smoldering, could have destroyed any evidence of the children's bodies. Jenny Sodder's later experiments with burning animal bones were intended to prove that the fire could not have consumed the children's bodies entirely. However, these home experiments did not replicate the exact conditions of the house fire, such as the presence of other combustibles, the structure's collapse, and prolonged burning at high temperatures. Thus, while her findings were compelling to the family, they may not accurately reflect what happened during the actual fire. Additionally, the state inspector's conclusion that the fire was caused by faulty wiring was based on a common and plausible cause for house fires at the time. electrical fires were not uncommon, and the wiring in older homes, especially those with additional electrical loads from Christmas decorations, was particularly susceptible to short circuits. Despite the compelling aspects of this theory, it leaves some questions unanswered. The disappearance of the ladder and the failure of the trucks are points of suspicion, as is the absence of identifiable remains. However, these elements could potentially be explained by the chaos of the fire and the frantic attempts to save the children. If the fire was indeed an accident, the Sodder family's grief and persistent search for answers can be understood as a natural response to the loss and the unexplained details surrounding the tragedy. The uncertainty and lack of closure would drive their continuous efforts to find alternative explanations, even if the most straightforward answer is that the children tragically perished in the fire. Yet, the enduring mystery and the family's doubts have kept this theory from being universally accepted, leaving room for the exploration of other possibilities. Was it truly a tragic accident, or is there more to the story? The second theory suggests that the 5 missing Sodder children were kidnapped, either before or during the fire, and that the blaze was deliberately set to cover up the abduction. This theory is rooted in the suspicious circumstances surrounding the fire and the subsequent sightings of the children, which suggests that they may have been taken by someone with a motive against the Sodder family. One of the key elements supporting the kidnapping theory is the sequence of unusual events leading up to the fire. A few months prior to the incident, a stranger visited the Sodder home, asking about work. He wandered to the back of the house and pointed to the fuse boxes, telling George that they would cause a fire someday. This comment seemed odd at the time, but took on new significance after the fire. Additionally, a man trying to sell life insurance to George became irate when George refused, warning that his house would go up in smoke and his children would be destroyed. George's outspoken criticism of Benito Mussolini and his anti-fascist stance made him enemies within the local Italian community, providing a potential motive for retribution. On the night of the fire, Jenny Sodder received a strange phone call around 12:30 a.m. from a woman whose voice she did not recognize. The caller asked for someone Jenny had never heard of, and then laughed strangely before hanging up. This call, followed by a loud thud on the roof and rolling noises that Jenny heard shortly afterward, added to the sense of something amiss. These events, coupled with the discovery that the phone lines to the house had been cut, suggest a deliberate attempt to disable the family's communication. As the fire raged, George and Jenny's efforts to save their children were thwarted in ways that seemed more than coincidental. The ladder that was always kept propped against the house was missing, later found in a ditch some distance away. George's trucks, which he intended to use to reach the attic, mysteriously failed to start despite having worked perfectly the previous day. Some have speculated that these obstacles were intentionally placed to prevent the family from rescuing the children. Following the fire, multiple sightings of the children were reported. A woman claimed to have seen them in a car the night of the fire, peering out from a vehicle passing by the scene. Another woman, staying at a Charleston hotel, said she saw the children with 2 Italian-speaking adults. She identified them from photos, insisting they were the Sodder children. Despite these sightings, no concrete evidence was ever found to confirm the children's whereabouts. The theory that the children were kidnapped suggests that they were taken by individuals seeking revenge against George for his political views, or by someone involved in organized crime. The Italian mafia's presence in the United States during the 1940s was significant, and the notion that the children could have been taken as part of a vendetta is not implausible. However, this theory also has its weaknesses. The absence of any ransom note or communication from the kidnappers is unusual, as is the lack of any concrete evidence despite the extensive search efforts by the Sodder family. The lack of remains in the fire does lend some credence to the idea that the children were not in the house at the time, but it also raises questions about how such a coordinated abduction could have been carried out without leaving any traces. The kidnapping theory hinges on several coincidences and the assumption of a well-orchestrated plan to abduct the children and cover it up with a fire. While it addresses some of the suspicious elements surrounding the case, it also relies on a number of speculative connections. If the children were indeed kidnapped, who was behind it? And why was no clear demand or message ever sent to the Sodder family? The third theory suggests that the disappearance of the Sodder children was part of a broader conspiracy to cover up a sinister plot. According to this theory, powerful individuals or groups orchestrated the abduction of the children and the subsequent fire to hide their true motives, which could involve anything from organized crime to political retribution. Supporters of this theory point to the various anomalies and suspicious activities surrounding the incident. George Sodder was an outspoken critic of Benito Mussolini and the fascist regime in Italy, which earned him both friends and enemies within the local Italian-American community. This political stance could have made him a target for those who disagreed with his views or had ties to the fascist government. In the months leading up to the fire, George had several unsettling encounters. A life insurance salesman warned him that his house would go up in smoke and his children would be destroyed because of his outspoken opinions. Another visitor to the Sodder home, seeking work, took an unusual interest in the family's electrical fuse boxes, predicting they would cause a fire. These incidents suggest that the family might have been under surveillance or targeted by individuals with malicious intent. On the night of the fire, several unusual occurrences heightened suspicions of foul play. The phone lines to the house were cut, preventing the family from calling for help. A stranger's odd phone call shortly before the fire, asking for someone who didn't live there and laughing strangely, added to the eerie sequence of events. Moreover, the sound of a thud and rolling noise on the roof, heard by Jenny Sodder, suggested that something was thrown onto the house, possibly an incendiary device to start the fire. George's efforts to save his children were thwarted by a series of seemingly inexplicable obstacles. The ladder, always kept in the same spot, was missing and later found discarded far from the house. Both of George's trucks, which had been in good working condition the previous day, failed to start. These hindrances appeared too coincidental, leading to the suspicion that they were deliberately placed to prevent a rescue. In the aftermath of the fire, the absence of any remains of the 5 children was highly suspicious. Experts argued that even in intense fires, human bones would typically remain. Jenny Sodder's experiments with burning animal bones, which never resulted in complete incineration, further fueled doubts about the official explanation. The discovery of small bone fragments during a later excavation of the site only added to the mystery. These fragments were found to be human, but did not match the ages of the missing children. The conspiracy theory also draws on reported sightings of the children after the fire. These include a woman claiming to have seen them in a passing car on the night of the fire, and another woman insisting she saw them in a Charleston hotel with 2 Italian-speaking adults. These sightings suggest that the children could have been abducted and hidden, potentially taken overseas or to a location where they would never be found. The idea of a broader conspiracy involving organized crime or political enemies provides a framework for understanding the numerous oddities and suspicious events. The Italian mafia, active in the United States during the 1940s, could have had both the motive and means to carry out such an elaborate scheme. If George's political views or business activities conflicted with their interests, the kidnapping and cover-up could have been a calculated act of retribution or intimidation. However, this theory is not without its criticisms. The lack of concrete evidence, such as a ransom note or definitive proof of the children's fate, makes it difficult to substantiate. The theory also relies on connecting various circumstantial pieces of evidence, which can be interpreted in multiple ways. Yet, the theory of a conspiracy to cover up a sinister plot remains compelling because it addresses many of the unanswered questions and unexplained elements of the case. Was George Sodder targeted for his political beliefs? And were his children victims of a broader scheme to silence or punish him? Thank you for joining us on this episode of 3 Theories. The mysterious disappearance of the Sodder children is a haunting case that has perplexed investigators and captured the public's imagination for decades. Did the children tragically perish in an accidental fire? Were they kidnapped as part of a personal vendetta? Were they caught in a web of conspiracy and political intrigue? Or could there be another explanation? What do you believe? To learn more about the Sodder children and their mysterious disappearance, visit the resources provided in the show notes and on our website, 3theoriespodcast.com. There you can find detailed information and additional reading to help you form your own conclusions. We want to hear your thoughts and theories. Share them with us on social media and join the conversation. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Your support helps us reach more curious minds like yours and continue to explore the world's greatest mysteries. Join us next time as we uncover another intriguing case and present 3 more theories for you to consider. Until then, keep questioning, keep exploring, and remember, sometimes truth is stranger than fiction.